We're ready.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate it. So with that, I will call the meeting to order at 10:09. And we'll want to do some roll call for us, Alicia.
Yes. Before we get started, members, just so you're aware, Patrick, you need to speak up when you speak at the board meeting so that the mic picks you up for those in the room, but also for those who are watching the live stream. So speak up when you vote, speak up when you make comments. For the first couple meetings, I would request that if you are making a motion or seconding, that you say your last name and then makes the motion in seconds until we get a good understanding of what everyone sounds like, and that will help us with our record keeping. So roll call. Member Burton. Here. Member Katniss.
Here.
Member Clark.
Here.
Member Clegg. Here. Member Hagerman.
Here.
Member Haley.
Here.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Here.
Member Kravickas.
Here.
Member Meyerson.
Here.
Dr. Robbins.
Present.
President Corr.
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you so much. Robbie, you can hear us okay?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. President's report, Director, or business reports, I'm sorry, Director Williams.
Thank you.
Get us organized.
Thank you, President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. The first agenda item under President's report is the election of the vice president. Members, pursuant to R7-2-101A6, if a vacancy occurs in the office of the president, the vice president shall immediately become the president. As soon as practical, the board shall elect the new vice president. The process of doing this is as follows. I will lead this nomination. I will ask if there's a nomination from the floor. This will serve as the motion. So the person making the nomination is also making the motion. I will then ask for a second to the nomination. Once the nomination has been once we get a second on that nomination, that will serve as the nominee for vice president. I will then ask if there are any additional nominations. If there are none, then we will move to a ballot vote. I will distribute the ballots. I'll find them. They're here somewhere. Here they are. The half sheet of paper, you will see a space for you to write your choice of vice president based upon the nominees or nominee. You will vote yay or nay, and then you will sign your ballot. I will remind you of who's been nominated prior to you voting. Staff will then collect the ballots, and I will announce the new vice president for the board. Members, do we have a nomination for vice president?
Members, I would like to nominate Christy Burton to serve in the role of vice president, as Member Burton is a veteran member of the board and has shown leadership throughout her tenure with the board.
Thank you, Member Clark. Do we have a second to Member Clark's nomination for Christy Burton? Seconded by Member Haley.
Second.
Do we have any other nominations from the floor? Okay, members, at this time, Christy Burton is nominated for vice president. We'll be around to collect your ballots. Dr. Robbins, you'll just send me that email.
I sent it to you.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Sir.
Thank you.
on a mud catcher. The suspense is killing me.
With a smiley face.
President Report, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, Christy Burton will serve as the vice president for the remainder of the 22 calendar year. Congratulations, Member Burton. Dr. Purdy, you can move on to your next agenda item.
Thank you, Alicia. Well, first of all, I would like to welcome an amazing new slate of members, great new energy in the room. I think it would be a good use of our time. Spend a little bit of time, go down the road here and introduce yourself. But also want to make special mention of Member Burton and her willingness to serve as vice president. I had the honor of serving with Christy 4 years, probably now, 5 years, going on 5 years. So just really grateful of your willingness to step forward. So just excited about the prospect of getting to know all of you a little bit better and doing the good work of the state of Arizona for our kids, most importantly. So if I don't have a preference, maybe down on the left, and we'll come on down this way, and just a little bit about yourself and your interests in serving on the board and whatnot.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here. My name is Carla Phillips-Kravickas. I've been involved in Arizona education policy for probably close to 25 years, as well as on the national level as well. And I have 2 children. I have an 18-year-old getting ready to graduate high school, break my heart, and a 14-year-old daughter in 9th grade.
My name is Catherine Haley. I'm the founder and partner of Oak Rose Group, a strategy consulting company that focuses on education and workforce. I've spent about 20 years in the education workforce policy space. I spent 13 years on Capitol Hill, where I worked on K-12, WIOA, higher ed, a number of those other policies, and then 5 years in philanthropy. And it's wonderful to be home, and it's an honor to be able to serve with all of you.
My name is Scott Hagerman. I'm the superintendent of the Tankerville School District. This is my 23rd year as an educator. I was a special educator, director of special ed, elementary principal. I have a 7-year-old son and a 17-year-old daughter, and I'm just happy, like everyone else, to be here to see what I can do to help education in Arizona.
Good morning. I also want to say welcome to the new board members. I'm Superintendent Kathy Hoffman. Prior to being elected, I was first a preschool teacher, then worked in special education as a speech language pathologist. And now it's my privilege to lead the Department of Education and continue to advocate for our public education system at the state level. I want to be available to any of the board members if there's ever any questions or any way that the department can be of service to you in your role as a board member. And then I'll just add that I'm a new mom with a 4-month-old at home to Clara.
Nice to meet everyone. I am Daniel Core. I'm the proud president of Arizona Western College in Yuma, Arizona. I've done that for 6 years and have served on this board for a little over 5 years. Just happy to get to know all of you and again, do good work and maybe have a little fun.
Morning, I'm Christy Burton. I know actually quite a few of you, and welcome. I've been in 2017, so we've been here a while, and it has been an honor to continues to be an honor to serve on this board. I am the co-founder of the Burton Family Foundation, and we invest in education and other youth-serving organizations, mostly in Arizona. Do a lot of work in STEM education as well. I'm a mother of 5 children. One in college, and he's sort of taking the long road. He's using COVID as an excuse, and I'm kind of okay with that. It's my last one out of the house. So anyway, I'm thankful.
Good morning. My name is Julia Meyerson. I am an Arizona native and started my career in education teaching in a large district in the Bronx, New York, and then came back. This is now our 10th year at Vista College Prep. So I'm the founder and executive director at Vista College Prep, a public charter school serving students in South Phoenix, Maryville communities, and just so honored and proud to be here. I also have two small children, a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. So
good morning, everyone. I am Jason Cadney's. I am a passionate educator, teacher in the Isaac School District, where I've been for 11 years. I teach 7th and 8th grade math, algebra, and geometry. And I'm also the founder of a comprehensive college access program to help kids that are first generation college students be able to go to college. And I'm just very, very proud and honored to serve with all of you. And we're going to do some good work.
Well, my name is Jenny Clark. I'm also an Arizona native. I also went to Arizona Public Schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, then on to the University of Arizona. So love my time in Arizona Public School System. I have 5 children also, 3, 6, 9, 10, and 12. And we actually, all 5 of my children are actually in the Arizona Empowerment Scholarship Account Program. So very happy to be here, very excited, happy to be representing the ESA program and also parents in our state.
Hi, my name is Jackie Clay. I'm the superintendent of Cochise County. I'm the Cochise County Superintendent of Schools there. I've been in the military 25 years, retired as a Command Sergeant Major in 2004. I've been in education for 18 years. I have 7 children, 21 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. which is a blessing and amazing to me. And I'm just glad to be here.
Robbie?
Hi, I'm Bobby Robbins. I'm the president of the University of Arizona. Welcome to all the new board members. Quite a new list of people. I've only been on the board for a short time. I've been at the University of Arizona for 5 years and represent the 3 state public universities, and I'm honored to do so on this board. It sounds like there are a couple of former Wildcats, and of course, I will be trying to recruit all of the children of the board members, the future Wildcats.
I was thinking of doing a wellness check for you over the weekend, but you seem to be doing just fine.
Yeah, it was disappointing. I think we had the talent to be in New Orleans, but we just, sometimes it doesn't happen the way you hope for. But great season, and
Good run.
as they say, there's always next year.
That's right. Thank you. That concludes my report. Superintendent Hoffman, your report.
Thank you. Good morning again. Before beginning, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge respectfully the geographical landscape of Maricopa County sits on the ancestral homelands of those indigenous nations that have inhabited this land for centuries, including the Pima, Lehigh, and Lavine peoples. One of the updates that I do make frequently as part of my superintendent report is on our allocation of ESSER funds. So for new board members who might not be as aware of what ESSER means, it is an acronym, but it basically is in regards to the COVID federal recovery funds. There have been 3 packages that have where federal funds have been allocated to Arizona. There's a bucket called referred to as ESSER funds that's specifically for K-12 education, and then a portion of the federal funds is considered discretionary funds or a state set aside that the Department of Education has the authority to do more statewide initiatives. So we've been strategically leveraging these set aside funds in a way to serve the entire state. And so one of the announcements I would like to share today is about Donors Choose. 2 weeks ago, we announced one of our largest investments to date with $14 million partnership with Donors Choose, which was to fund $1,000 classroom teacher grants for all of our pre-K through 12 educators across the state to access. In just under 2 weeks, we funded over 14,600 projects with the $14 million investment. And of course, beyond seeing the thrill of how educators have utilized this money to support student achievement, I'm so excited to hear how our students have been impacted by this funding. For example, I've already heard from Ms. James' fifth grade class. I heard from her students in St. John's, who shared with me how grateful that they were that the funding provided them with new books for their class. Their teacher shared that prior to receiving this funding, her students had to share their classroom's 5 copies of the Lightning Speed, which she uses every year as a novel study. But now they were able to purchase a copy of the book for all of her students in the class. These are small but incredible ways that this dedicated classroom funding can change our students' lives. In the coming days and weeks, we will be announcing the recipients of our last and final round of federal funding from the American Rescue Plan. These recipients will receive our state set aside dollars to support student and educator achievement. And I'm so excited to announce this, and of course, beyond grateful for the opportunities that these federal relief dollars have afforded to our schools. If you'd like to see all the ways that we've invested this funding back into our school communities, you can go to our department's website and visit the school year 2021-22 webpage. And there's a way to see, or let me know if you would like me to send you the link. Also, as I shared last month, our Student Advisory Council had held the first ever Student Summit, which was focused on topics selected by the students. They focused on technology, mental health, and cultural awareness. Our students shared their personal experiences, their hopes, their ideas for how to build a more inclusive classroom environment to uplift student well-being and provide them with the tools, especially for a digital future. I was so proud and impressed with how they show their vulnerability and also their professionalism. And if you would like to view a copy of the recording, it's also on our website under the section about the departments. And just to add on, our Student Advisory Council is made up of just over 20 students from 5th through 12th grade, and they're representative of across the state of Arizona. And I meet with them on a quarterly basis, and I'm so grateful that our students have the opportunity to present here at our State Board of Education meeting so that our board members and the state, anyone listening in, can also hear directly from our students on the issues that they care most about. So today we have 2 students who I believe are both 5th graders, and they're joining us virtually. And so first I would like to introduce Aryan Tuli.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aryan Tuli, and I go to Basis Peoria, and I'm in 7th grade. And I'm really thankful for the board to give me this opportunity to speak on the unique problem of mental health being faced by students in almost all grades with varying magnitude. I think the problem with mental health is that it's unique and it's underaddressed. An online search shows that the mental health issues in students have been steadily increasing over the last few years. Reason for this increase is multifactorial, but it can be contributed to bullying based on orientation, race, ethnicity, and disabilities. Research studies done by the Mayo Clinic show approximately 30% of students among different grades suffer from depression, half feel anxious or overwhelmed, and many later struggle with making friends and developing social skills, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. 67% of students who have substance abuse problems were also found to be suffering from mental health disorders. Most of students that struggle from these issues are reluctant to seek help, which leads to even more negative effects like poor academic performance, dropping out, and even suicide. As per research done by the Washington Post, for every 1 therapist, social worker, or counselor, there are 430 students. Many schools don't even have a personnel like this. To prevent or at least alleviate these issues in students, there should be a therapist in every school if possible. If this goal is not attainable, teachers can also be trained to identify students at risk. Other root causes of mental health issues can also be chalked up to what's going on in a student's personal life, such as child mistreatment/abuse, family conflict, and loss of supportive relationships. A death of a loved one can also lead to mental health issues, And all of these signs can be recognized by a therapist, counselor, or social worker. They can assist the student as they need. These mental health issues in other students can not only harm themselves, but harm other students too. If someone has a problem, they could do something rash or potentially dangerous and hurtful towards another student. These issues could also develop later into something worse, and it's best for a therapist to identify and assist the student in need as early as possible. Some students may also turn to smoking tobacco, vaping, or doing illicit drugs in school. It would be up to a therapist to recognize the signs of drug usage in students. If they can identify it correctly, they can help the student not get addicted, which would help them out a lot in the long run. School shootings and gun violence have also been attributed to students that were depressed. 78% of the students in these shootings had a history of suicide attempts, but only 1/3 ever received mental evaluation and 1/5 ever got diagnosed. This shows that the students that were depressed or suicidal, they didn't get an evaluation and they didn't even get diagnosed. 71% of the attackers were also victims of bullying, and 98% suffered a personal loss prior to the attack. This once again shows that students have not been evaluated or diagnosed for mental health issues, but suffered a loss, been bullied, and have been suicidal. Since it's up to therapists to recognize these signs in students, but they weren't recognized in time, this shows that there aren't enough therapists to every school. Though drugs, school shootings, and self-harm are the extremes, mental health problems are the underlying root cause, and it could take only one therapist in every school to stop substance abuse, gun violence, and self-harm. It could save so many lives just with the help of one therapist. I'd like to thank the Arizona State Board of Education again for giving me this opportunity to speak, share my thoughts, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah.
Our second student is Des Chiu.
Hello, good morning, State Board members. My name is Desha Chobanali. I am 12 years old and I am a 6th grader at Star School. I would like to talk about concussions. A student who has gotten a concussion should be allowed more than 10 days or what the school allows. This is because the brain heals differently than a wound or other injury. The brain can take 2 days, a week, 4 weeks, or even months to heal. When someone has a concussion, it can become further injured during its healing time. Everyone's brain heals at different rates. When the brain can take 2 days, a week, 4 weeks, or even months to heal. When someone has a concussion, it can become further injured during its healing time. Everyone's brain heals at different rates, and the side effects from a concussion can affect everyday activities and life for a student. It is not fair for a student to be put on attendance probation or for a high school student to lose credit over an injury that they can't control. A solution is that a doctor should determine how long a student with a concussion should be out of school. Thank you to State Superintendent Kathy Hoffman and State Board members and Project Manager Sophia Braham. I'm honored to be here speaking on the Student Advisory Council. Thank you.
If you don't do students, my apologies, but I had the grades wrong, but they did a fabulous job introducing themselves. Yes, so thank you so much to our students. That concludes my superintendent report.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Hoffman. Always love hearing from the students, so thank you for bringing them and their perspective to us. Executive Director Williams, you have a report this month.
President Core, Superintendent Hoffman members, I do not. Thank you.
Fantastic. And we will move right on to the call of the public. This is a time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or on the consent portion of the agenda. I believe we have a number of speakers, so we will limit the speakers to 3 minutes. Director Williams, I understand we've received some requests to speak. Is that right?
That is correct, President Core. We also have 11 written comments that have been uploaded and provided to the board members ahead of time. There are 10 speakers. However, one speaker who was supposed to be in person today may not join us because she has some personal things going on. As staff will reach out to ensure that her comments are received by the board. And there's a second individual who may be having some tech difficulties. So if we don't get to her today, then we will do the same request of her so that the board members at least have her comments after the fact. First up, we have Kathy Bolts, followed by Sarah Blank. Kathy?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I introduced myself last month, but I'm going to do it again since so many people are new. Since 2017, I have been an ESA account holder as a mother of a special education student who is now approaching his high school years. I served on the ESA Parent Advisory Council from December 2020 to August 2021, when I was removed for communicating with stakeholders over concerns about changes to the ESA program. The concerns I communicated were confirmed in the presentation of the first quarter report by the ADE director to SBE last September. And to clarify, my professional experience is in science. My doctorate is in biochemistry. I am not a K-12 educator. I own a small business that specializes in supporting oncology drug development and diagnostic techniques for biotech companies, and I communicate medical science. So I come at things from a pretty analytical viewpoint. It's just how I am. We just got the draft ESA handbook, and it was a very brief comment period. I was unable to attend the meetings due to some personal issues. Similarly, the other mother who was going to attend this morning, she was not able to come. She was in the hospital all night with her child. And I want you to bear in mind that the largest group of users of the ESA program are special education parents who have children with significant needs, medical needs, significant learning disabilities. And typically I call into this meeting for my son's therapy appointment. But I had the good fortune, my husband was able to take the day off and take him. So I'm just going to narrow in on one concern. I have a lot, I wrote a letter. In the draft handbook, page 9, footnote 5 says, while there are many services and items that can be purchased with ESA funds, there may be cases where reimbursement is the only purchase option. So there are a lot of new conditions, guidance, sort of rules slipped into this new handbook. The statute says Arizona Empowerment Scholarship accounts are established to provide options for the education of students in the state. The Class Wallet debit card was established to allow parents to make purchases outside of the Class Wallet platform. However, it has blocked merchant category codes, MCCs, which are how credit cards are controlled. And one of the main blocked codes of concern is 8211, elementary and secondary schools. This is blocked in part due to the contract for the card, which states all tuition payments must be made through the platform direct pay feature. This affects not only brick and mortar private schools in Arizona who might accept ESA funds, but it also accepts many online learning programs. And these types of purchases for online learning programs are clearly allowed per statute. Now you might ask, why aren't every vendor already signed up for Class Wallet? Well, there are a number of reasons they decline. The financial risks of linking their bank account, as agreeing to direct ACH transfers is highly risky, and Class Wallet has already had repeated data breaches. The accounting burden added by Class Wallet and their poor record keeping on which funds are for which purchase. The slow transfer of funds, which is often 10, 21 days or more. Vendors have been told moving funds can take up to 3 months. Vendors don't like that. And the biggest thing, vendors prefer to be paid by card. This is the convention for many such retail purchases now. We use cards. So what do the block purchases, especially those online learning programs, mean for ESA students? The tabled second quarter report states there are over 11,000 students that have an ESA. These accounts are about $6,000 for a general education student, which is about $500 per month. And they're over $25,000 for the over 4,000 special education students. And those range from about $2,000 to $4,000 per month. And the median,
Quite a bit over already.
sorry, okay, the median household income is $60,000 in Arizona. So families have $5,000 a month. If they have a special education student, they'll need to front $4,000. It comes down to education versus mortgage. So the card needs to work for allowed expenses. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Foltz, appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sarah Blank, followed by Tamara Kumpmiller. Sarah? Jessica,
Good
Sarah.
morning. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, thank you so much. President Corr and members of the board, I would like to thank you for your support of the ESA program. Thank you for listening to us and supporting the education of all Arizona students. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. There are 2 ESA items on today's agenda, the tabled quarterly report and the revised parent handbook. Both items have a clear lack of parent engagement and feedback. The purpose of the ESA program is to empower students to access the education that best fits their needs. As the users of the ESA program, parents understand what is needed for our students to thrive. As such, it is very troublesome that parents receive no communication or response to their many concerns voiced at the February SBE meeting. ADE submitted the exact same report along with a short executive summary. ADE's executive summary defines one concern as parent confusion. This is absolutely correct. Parents are confused. There is a distinct lack of communication, consistency, and transparency in ADE's administration of ESA. Policies and procedures should be consistent and well communicated. Parents should never have to guess about program expectations. Parents should never have to worry that they will have to repay an item approved by ADE staff. Parents should not have to take responsibility for ADE errors and lack of training. The second ESA item is the revised handbook. This draft has been heavily changed. It is my understanding that the handbook should only receive drastic revisions at the 3-year mark. This year should only focus on statute updates and the removal of Bank of America verbiage. While many parents are pleased with some of the handbook changes, I ask what has changed to allow these changes? Why has the disallowed item list grown and the allowed list remained stagnant? Why has the associated goods definition changed to become more restrictive? Are parents of special needs students now required to go to get new METs or IEPs that include specific items? Are we expected to use our children's therapy hours so therapists can write letters explicitly stating the exact item down to the brand? This is burdensome to families, public schools, and providers. Many of these items are common sense and used throughout schools and therapy clinics. As students should have access, or all students should have access to the items that they need to succeed academically. The handbook is negative in tone and focuses on what not to do. The handbook should serve as a guide and a tool for empowering education. Similar to all ESA documents, policies, and procedures, the handbook is not accessible to visually impaired or Spanish-speaking parents. As noted in R7-2-1503, on or before March 1st of each year, the department shall provide the board with a handbook developed in consultation with parents of children on the program. ADE collected some feedback, but this handbook revision was not created alongside parents. Parents were not given adequate time, resources, or communication to fully participate in the handbook's revision. The 2 feedback sessions were in the middle of the day when many parents are working, educating their children, and or taking them to therapies. The meetings were mostly one-sided and parents did not receive the answers to their many questions and concerns. The survey did not allow parents to fully engage or address their concerns. This does not constitute consulting or working collaboratively with parents. Therefore, I ask that SBE not accept this handbook revision. I ask that ADE follow SBE rules and work with parents on any revisions. I ask that the handbook be limited to its appropriate scope. This revision should only encompass statute changes. In the event that extensive revisions are required, I ask that ADE and or SBE consult with ESA families to address all of their concerns and requests. I ask that ADE collaborate with families to ensure that their students are empowered to access their education. Thank you for your time and your support.
Thank you, Ms. Blank. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up, we have Tamara Kumpmiller, followed by Amanda Adams. Jessica, was camera able to get on?
Yes. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm the one having tech issues. Our internet went out right as the meeting started, so I apologize and I'm a little frazzled, so I'm going to do my best to pull myself back together. But good morning, board and President Kaur. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak today. I am an ESA parent of 2 special education students who hold ESA accounts with one other kiddo currently in public school. I wanted to basically say everything Sarah just said, except a couple of other things. So I'm not going to repeat. I'll just go on with my own thoughts. In response to one of the things that Sarah did bring up was the communication. And I just want to say that when, I met my husband, I was told the biggest part of a relationship is communication. That is the very most important part of any relationship. And I feel like my relationship currently with ESA is stagnant because the communication is not what it should be. R72-1507B says the department shall establish a process to review an expense before making an administrative decision to deny the expense. The department shall provide a copy of the process to the board and include the process in the handbook adopted pursuant to R72-1503. This has not happened, and parents are begging for guidance for their purchases for their ESA students. In the Q2 report, it said that there were parental concerns regarding repayment for previously approved items, later deemed to be disallowed. These items had ESA staff eyes on them and approvals given, and in some cases, more than once, up to and including being reimbursed for these expenses. So without very clear guidelines for how to purchase, how is a parent supposed to know when purchases are approved? I can't take the chance of financially devastating my family in order to provide educational opportunities for my children. Yet we can't get straight answers for things like, do the very words required or recommended have to appear within the pages of our curriculum, which has to be meticulously highlighted and sent to the ESA before I can purchase things needed to educate my children? Is there no longer any common sense showing an item is needed? For example, I purchased a guitar learning book and my child is enrolled in a guitar class, but I have no document that says you are required to have a guitar. So I'm not allowed to purchase a guitar for my child. Or I purchase a how to play baseball book with a bat, balls, helmet, backstop, bases, and a mitt. Is that not clear enough demonstration needed to learn to play baseball? The report also says there's confusion between statutes and rules, and there absolutely is, because we can't get clear communication even when directly asking. Account holders need to know how to make purchases and that those purchases will stay approved, how to keep their accounts in good standing, and with whom we should be communicating. If the Attorney General is the one making the decisions, should we have an Attorney General's help desk and be communicating with them instead of ADE or ESA? Should we expect more clear communication from them? My children are among the 30% of 11,000 accounts that currently home educate, but we certainly don't have the same guidance as those that have private school do. Please, let's work on the communication. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tamara.
Next up, we have Amanda Adams, followed by Coco Lovejoy.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes. All right. Good morning. I am really glad to be here this morning and speaking to you about the SB handbook and the Q2 report. I'm feeling a little more optimistic this morning as I speak to you about ESA with some thoughts on the new handbook. First, I want to acknowledge the work that has been put into the new handbook. I think it's a big step forward in helping caregivers obtain the best education for their students. I really appreciate some of the things that have been more specified, such as educational in the educational materials category. That includes educationally obvious things like manipulatives for math and English and workbooks and maps and globes and educational board games. It's really nice to have those spelled out in that so that there isn't confusion between the staff and the parents. I also really appreciate the thoughtful inclusion of items that are often supplemental to curriculums. They kind of specified some things that could fall into that category, and I appreciate them kind of including that. It helps, I think, keep everybody on the same page. One of my biggest concerns has been echoed already here today, and that is of communication. I was really hopeful to see a section in the handbook that was on communication that talked more specifically about what things needed to be communicated to parents when decisions were made, specifically on like approval processes, specific items and things like that, and then how that communication should occur. There was great anticipation last year when we got a communications director and specialist that this was going to get better. And in the comments to parents from this last month's parent feedback, communication concerns seem to have been dismissed. The response was that things we're calling attention to affected so few in the program overall that they didn't warrant direct communication with the parents. And I feel like these numbers are deceiving because so many of the parents use these funds for public or for private schools, which is pretty cut and dry, as opposed to those of us that have to home educate because there isn't a private school option that fits our needs. These can be seemingly small items or only affect a small group of people can affect someone in the future, and especially those that had pre-approval for these similar items. I would have liked to have seen at least those parents been reached out to and communicated with during this process. The other major item of concern for me deals with supplemental items. The verbiage recommended or required is being stressed instead of the much more inclusive definition that SB came up with a little over a year ago, that is relevant materials directly related to the course of study for which they are being used to introduce content and instructional strategies, or enhance, complement, enrich, extend, or support the curriculum. So last year we did a farm unit. Under the more expanded verbiage, we were able to get a root view garden and a Play-Doh set that had a sheep you could shear. These items were very useful in extending our learning, but were not directly recommended or required by the curriculum. This summer, we did a water unit discussing water cycles, water flow, or float. We were able to get water tubes, floating blocks, waterfall exploration towers, and floating letter balls. All items were not specifically listed in a curriculum, but I was able to show how they enhanced our curriculum and get them approved. And this is why SB verbiage is so important to our children's education when it comes to these supplemental items. I just want to say again how much I appreciate this program and how much it has done for our family. And I look forward to continuing to work with ADE and the board as we move forward in these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda.
Kayla Lovejoy, followed by Allison Wilkes.
Hi, do you hear me?
We can.
Good morning, President Narducci, Superintendent Hoffman, dear members of the board, brand new baby members of the board. Hey, Jenny. Thank you again for the opportunity and willingness to hear us. And we are more than willingness to know that we are more than numbers in yet another government program. I'm focusing my comment on the fact that ESA got into the habit of lying. The department submitted a 2-page response to the over 49 pages comments by parents for the February 28 meeting when the board rejected the report. In this report, there are lies in every paragraph. I'm talking about the ADE response to public comments received by SB. Due to the limited time, I cannot mention them all, but if you are interested, I can send it to you in a follow-up email. I'll mention here only the first 2 concerns. In the AD response to public comments received by SBE, we read that, and I quote, currently staff are processing, reviewing more than 30,000 transactions each month, not including calls, emails, and service tickets. It was recently discovered the staff had approved several items in error, end quote. The 5 parents, and I quote again, the 5 parents were sent letters stating that the items purchased were disallowed and they were given 10 days to repay, parentheses, with the repaid funds being returned to their student account or provide additional documentation showing that items were recommended or required by the curriculum per statute, end quote. There are several lies with these statements. Lie number 1, it was discovered. The dictionary tells us that discover means, I quote, to find something or someone unexpectedly or in the course of a search, end quote. I kindly but firmly request SBA to demand ADE to show transparency in how did they targeted these 5 individuals. It has come to my attention that ESA employees lurk in private Facebook rooms and target advocates of the program. It has come to my attention that these 5 parents were targeted by name based on screenshots from these groups. Line number 2, I quote, and they were given 10 days to repay, parentheses, with the repaid funds being returned to their students' account, end parentheses. And close parenthesis, end quote. I got this disallowed letter here from a student who received it, and I quote, please submit sufficient documentation or repayment not later than 10 business days from the date of this letter in accordance with ARS 15-2403, letter C, and AAC RC-2-1508H. Failure to correct your expense may result in removal from the ESA program. If you would like to schedule an informal settlement conference with ADE to discuss this letter and possible ways to come to a settlement regarding this matter, please contact me later than, end quote. No mistake, it's not later than, end quote. Nowhere was said that the funds will go to the student's account. Why do I bring line number 2 here? To show how many little lies from the department amount to total loss of credibility. When the department cannot say 2 statements without saying 2 lies, we have a problem and we need to cut it from the root. Lies should not be tolerated and the department should be held accountable and responsible immediately, and these practices should be investigated. Another issue is brought by this 2-page letter. Concern, parent confusion surrounding rules and statutes. Response, portions of the rules conflict with statutes causing confusion for parents and staff trying to administer the program. It's been already defined, so for lack of time.
We always want to hear from you, but if you could bring it to a conclusion, you're a little over already.
May I speak on Anita's time? Okay, I'm sorry. I will bring it to a conclusion. Items were disallowed, and as it's specified in the final sentence, ADE cannot allow account holders to expend funds in a manner not permitted by statute. What nobody mentioned yet is that when they say holders cannot expend funds in a manner not permitted by statute, that phrase was left over from when we had the cards with Bank of America, but that statement is not there for funds spent through Class Wallet authorized by a technician. When I'm gonna finish right now, I promise.
Please.
So, this very paragraph relates to expenses made with the debit card. This was never intended for purchases made through Class Wallet, which was one of the selling points to the Treasurer's Office, was the purchases made through the platform get pre-approval by trained technicians and only go through when they meet the criteria. Items were disallowed. Oh, the 5 parents the department is pinning their mistakes on purchased with approval, and I quote, pursuant to ARS, whatever the notes, I can send it to you. ESA holders may utilize ESA funds to purchase curricular and supplementary materials as defined in AAC RC-2-1501. Supplemental materials are relevant materials.
Thank
It's
you.
important though.
It's absolutely important. We always encourage you to submit things in writing, and just for the expediency of this meeting, I do need to cut you off there. Again, would encourage you and anyone else to submit written comments, which are diligently reviewed.
I appreciate it, but I really think we need to rebuild this program and get rid of the leadership so we can get it back to where it was. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Go.
Allison Wilkes, followed by Sophia Graham. Oh, sorry. Allison.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Good morning, board and new board nominees. I look forward to seeing what the new nominees to the board have in store for us, and I thank the outgoing board members for their service. I'm a parent of an ESA recipient. I have a professional background in speech and language as well as educational advocacy. I want to again thank you for the opportunity to address the board regarding my continued concerns of the ESA program. Thank you, board, for rejecting the quarterly report of the ESA director at the last month's meeting. I know it has been stated that the board has no authority over ADE and the ESA program, so it was good to see you assert power over what you do control. I'm sorry the board feels they lack authority over many issues that parents bring to you regarding ESA. There is one board member who does have the authority to enforce, correct, and hold accountable these issues. Perhaps you should all be asking Superintendent Hoffman to do her job. I was disappointed that Superintendent Hoffman voted to accept the director's report last month, and I hope the rest of the board will implore her to do her job and start addressing the issues in the ESA program. I have emailed her numerous times, and I have never received any response or acknowledgement. I asked the board to again reject the report submitted by the ESA director as no changes were made. This report was determined not acceptable by the board at last month's meeting. I find it concerning and unacceptable that the ESA director has simply resubmitted the same report to you this month. Her addition of a 2-page response in which she spins parent concern is not acceptable. The response does not acknowledge or address parents' concerns, and the tone is both dismissive and shirking in accountability. I would also like to beg the board to reject the draft ESA handbook. I have emailed you my concerns, which would exceed my speaking time today, so I'll let you read them. Parents were not given adequate time to provide feedback, nor was the 3-question survey sent out thorough. Parents gave comments and asked questions. Questions posed have not received any response or answer. The handbook was only in a revision year. Revisions were to be due to statutory changes. The ESA department, who lacks educational background or expertise, has heavily revised and almost rewritten the handbook. They continue to take liberties and add rules and add what is disallowed and allowed. It states nothing in statute or makes any sense why what allowed or disallowed the changes. They continue to take these liberties. ESA account holders do not need a third set of rules. We need a roadmap to how to access the program. We need the handbook to include definitions and accurate information and align with statute. Thank you so much for your consideration, and I hope you are empowered to reject these items today. Thank you, board.
Thank you, Allison.
Next up, we have Kayla Sullivan, and we're gonna go back to a in-person comment from Christine McAfee. So Kayla.
Hello, members of the board. My name is Kayla Sullivan. I am an ESA parent to 3 students, and I would like to comment on the similar issues that people have brought up, specifically the issue regarding the ADE disregarding rules that were written by the state board to govern the department in how they are executing and administering the program, specifically with the issues of these 5 parents that were asked to repay for items that were approved sometimes multiple times, because some of these purchases had to be made with personal funds, and then reimbursements were requested, and those also have to go through an approval process. So many times these purchases were approved multiple times by ADE staffers, sometimes going all the way up to Ms. O'Brien herself. When the department comes back and asks for repayment of items that were already approved, that they've later figured out or decided that they are disallowed, this contradicts a rule that was written specifically to protect parents from this. Currently, the excuse being given by the department is that statute trumps rule. However, there is nothing in statute protecting the department and allowing them to go back and punish parents for mistakes made on their part. During the first rulemaking process, Rule 7-2 1507 is a 3-sentence rule stating that first sentence is that items that are approved, that the department can't go back and request repayment for an item that was previously approved. This was written because back when we were writing reports and submitting quarterly reports, things that had been given approval were purchased, and then we uploaded our reports. The department was coming back and saying, oh no, just kidding, that's not allowed, and you're gonna have to repay that. That rule was written specifically to protect parents from that kind of action from the department. If the department approved something, even if they approved it in error, they should not be punishing parents for that. Moving forward, obviously, things that should not be allowed shouldn't be allowed for other parents, but the original parent that received approval should not be subject to the department coming back and punishing them for the department's mistake. That same rule protects those purchases. Like if if something is made in error, approved in error, that the final sentence in that rule says that, you can't say, oh, well, that family got approved for it. We have students that are similarly situated, so we should be getting that as well. No, because if that item was purchased and shouldn't have been approved, then subsequent parents should not be allowed to make that purchase, but that original parent should. And by ignoring that rule entirely and coming after parents by saying, oh, well, we made a mistake, is incredibly irresponsible on the department's behalf. Like, it is, no one is holding them to account for making these errors. And why are so many being made? There continues to not be consistent training or policies regarding what is approved and what is not approved. And
May I ask you to finish up?
Yeah.
You're a little
Yeah.
over, so if you want to have a final statement to.
Yes, I will. We need to be able to ensure the department is holding true to statute and rule and not being allowed to punish parents for mistakes and shortcomings that they have within their department. And I echo what was said in the statement before, that the superintendent is lacking in her responsibility in keeping her department in line in these matters. Thank you.
Kayla. Thank you.
And last up, we have Kristen Beck.
Minute. I got more for the audience too.
Please.
All right. So first of all, I want to give it up for everybody, right? I'm super passionate, right? And I can hear from everybody who spoke voice. I definitely want to give it up for the kids, right? Because they 2 out of millions of kids who got a chance to speak. So that was incredible. It's incredible that we're here, right? Speaking on, whether we agree on certain issues or don't, right? It's like we're all passionate about education. And let me add to the passion today. So my name is Chris. About me, I'm from Robbins, which is in Illinois. And my dad would force me to read. My mom influenced me. She told me never join a gang. So I kind of struggled in school until I went to Moraine Valley and then Arizona State. So at ASU, Obama did our commencement in 2009, and it was incredible. He was the president at the time. He talked about we must always build our body of work. So I believe superintendents take the best selfies is doing that. It took me 36 years, right, to figure out who you all are, right? I never knew it growing up in school. And just recently, I looked up a meeting and I seen Miguel Cardona on there. And I was like, wow. I got a chance to speak to his staff, right? And I was like, man, you get a Secret Service? They're like, yeah. I'm like, you get to fly on Air Force One. So it was just so cool, right? So, this book is about changing the narrative, which is what he talked about, right? And being innovative. That's what a lot of his speech was about, because in my opinion, we want the kids learning, right? At a young age, who the leaders are, because we want them to be better than us, right? We want them to be the next Devin Booker, right? Or Steph Curry, as I always say, right? And in order to develop that skill set, they have to learn at a young age who the leaders are. So that's why I wrote it. And it's pretty cool. In a section of it, it has a part where, they can take a selfie on each different level, district, regional, right? Because I decided to become a sub at each different interaction. I was learning like, oh, it's a regional superintendent. Oh, it's a state superintendent. Oh, it's a national superintendent. Or so it was just incredible learning. I'm like, I gotta get back and teach the kids, because those 2 kids know, and I want to send them a copy too, right? Because they deserve it. Because on the opposite end, driving in, I saw the people cleaning up outside, right? In jail, right? And that's the opposite side of what we don't want, right? So in order to do that, we have to create our next generation of leaders. So I want to encourage you all to take action. I was in another board meeting in Chicago, and I gave him the book, and he set me up with a secretary, the curriculum director in like 5 minutes. So I was like, this guy's incredible, right? It's like, this is unbelievable. So I've been giving out a lot of these books for free, right? So hopefully, Ms. Burton, you can help me, right? I know you got some funding. But yeah, I want us to take this and reach out to the superintendent who taught us, whether he's alive or dead, and send him the book and write him a cool note. So,
Chris, thank you so much for coming to see us. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Very nice. Thank you. Is that the last of our public comments at this point? Thank you so much.
Public comments, yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Then I will move us on to item 3, the consent agenda. I believe Member Burton, you would like to pull item 3A. Is that correct? And Member Clark, you would like to pull item 3I. Is that also correct? Okay, with that, then we will certainly pull those items, and I would seek a motion to approve items 3B through 3H2. Do I have such a motion?
So
Thank you, Member Burton. Do I have a second? Second. Yeah, and again, until we all get to know each other, for the sake of taking notes too, if you announce who we are and when you're making a motion or a second. So thank you. We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion?
Yes, President Clark, I used to saying that. Board members, I would just like to comment on H, which is about approving the classroom-based educator preparation programs, and just point out that this is an innovative way of strengthening our teacher pipeline, where the school districts are teaching, they're certifying teachers on site. So as you can see, it's very exciting to me to see Deer Valley certifying specifically to make sure they're able to recruit and train teachers to become certified in serving students with mild and moderate disabilities. And but also great for Yuma,
Shout out to Yuma, thank you.
One of our rural communities to be able to have an on-site teacher training and certification program against that teacher pipeline. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to these districts for getting this to this point, and can't wait to approve them.
Awesome. Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman. Any other comments or discussion on the consent agenda items 3B through 3H2? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay, we will now circle back to item 3A. Member Burton, would you like to speak to item 3A?
Sure, thank you, President Core, Superintendent Hoffman. I actually just have a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank the department for providing us with a response. And I think the two comments are actually related. One has to do with the relationship between statute and rule. And actually, Lou, you might want to respond to this because it's confusing. My understanding is the legislature passes a law, passes a bill, becomes statute, and it's up to the board to create rules on how to implement that. And we did that with the ESA program, so we could become clear as to what was allowed and what wasn't allowed, specifically related to supplemental materials. So we've been going along, and then now all of a sudden it becomes not, statute supersedes rule. So I just like some clarification, and I'm not sure who can do that, but related to that.
Vice President Burton, I can. I think depending on the question asked, it might be more appropriate for an executive session if legal advice asked for that, however, too, so I don't get too off track. You are correct. Also, I would agree that when the concept of a statute related to a rule, corrected, a rule is meant to further, because you can't write everything into a statute. So the idea is when authority for rulemaking is given, body given that authority for rulemaking, then tries to, because it's usually in a position of more expertise or background or whatever have you, to make rules that will further the intent of that statute. That's what the board's doing. So specifically, going down to supplemental materials, the definition, I try to have these. So board's rules are found ACR set of 215.1. So it does include definitions, supplemental materials. And that relates then to the definition use of the term supplemental materials when it comes to a curriculum. That's the one found in 1524 under the definition of curriculum. So the board has done that. So up until that point, I think the board has done what it's supposed to do. My understanding is in terms of the comments is that there is discussion or difference of opinion on maybe perhaps what that means. Am I summarizing that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
I think that, and I would have to, I would have to take a bit of time. There's a specific question about that, of what it means if the board wants legal advice on, what it means or wants a discussion on. I think you're probably best to have a little bit of time just to look at it, get the definition before I'm certainly aware of it. And then it would be up to the board, I think, to have the discussion in an executive session if it's looking for advice. So with that said, what else can you do a better job of answering?
No, that I think that helped a lot, and I appreciate your response because I think there seems to be a lot of blaming going around, and I really don't want to blame the department because I think they're taking some direction from you. And if we want to go into executive session about these disallowed items, I think they are related to what we're talking about. Executive Director Williams, is that what we should do? The reason I'm not sure is because think of those 49 items, this is sort of what it's summarized to. So if this isn't related to a specific person, if this seems to be a group of items that has been changed, we can, I don't know that we need executive session, but the experts tell me, because I do have a concern about these 5 items.
President Court, Vice President Burton, members, I think a better solution would be to have an agenda item for the April board meeting that allows for the board to have some direct legal counsel with Lou Kudo, who's the board's AG representative. As this agenda item is more about accepting the Q2 report, and I don't want the board to go off of what was agendized for this meeting. And then what we could do is we could just get very specific whether or not the board, it sounds as if the board would like, or at least Member Burton would like to look at the statute and the rule around supplemental materials and anything else that may come up throughout today's conversations.
I think that's a good idea. I think the other thing related to the disallowed items, and speak generally, great if we can bring it up, but these items, I think at first glance, they look like, what does that have to do with education? And then I looked a little bit more closely, and actually, I've been around science fairs and I understand, I've seen ice makers used in science fairs, shaved ice machines, cotton candy in chemistry lessons for kids who just really aren't interested in how molecules and heat interact. So I just like to know if these had accompanying lesson plans with them, and if that is appropriate to talk about later, I'm fine with that, but I'm just not comfortable right now. But I also understand the rejection of these items may have to do with what we talked about in the first place, the relationship between interpretation of a rule that we adopted, all of us, and statute.
I think my Vice President, members of the superintendent, I think that that's also helpful, I think, for understanding the context. I think that discussion, I think it might be as Alicia said, because those are also points to talk about. So that would be my advice, just on the more conservative side.
Okay, and I am satisfied. I guess my question is it, should we wait to approve this report till we get that settled, or does it matter?
Vice President Burton, or President or Vice President, I'm saying President or Vice President Burton, members. I think that because this is just your vote today on this agenda item is just to accept the receipt of the Empowerment Scholarship account for Q2. It would be best to just accept the report, work through any other discussion that the board has on the Q2 report, such as if members want to see something else, especially since we've had a significant turnover of members in the last week. So that direction is given to the department so that when the Q3 report comes back to the board, we're able to vote to accept that receipt. And then a further agenda item for April so we can discuss some of the rule and the statute. I'm hearing some conversation around, well, what does a denied expense look like? So I could work with Superintendent Hoffman and her ESA team to maybe develop some of that material for the board members, whether we take that in executive session or open meeting.
Other thoughts or comments?
Yes, President Cora.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And
Member
President
Ford, go
Cora,
ahead.
Vice President Burton, please let me know, and Director Williams, if I'm doing anything that I should not be doing. I did take some time to provide some comments specifically related to ADE's response, a document that we were all included in the board member meeting. And I do have a few questions for Director O'Brien as well. First, since you brought it up, Member Vice President Burton, thank you, to the point of the comment that was made in ADE's response where it says portions of the rules conflict with the statute. And then two examples are given with the rules, R2 715-114, which is referring to the supplemental materials, and then also R7 215-07C, which refers to repayment. I know we're going to be discussing this more with legal, and I'm grateful for that. I do want to share my thoughts having worked on this particular issue. First, the rule does not appear to conflict with the statute, and ultimately, if one thinks that the rule conflicts with the statute, it really should be brought up in the rulemaking process. But in any case, under ARS 152403J, which I'll quote here, the policy handbook shall comply with the rules adopted by the State Board of Education. So that's pretty direct, that ADE is required to follow the rules. On the repayment issue, which I think is really important, and there was so much public comment on it at the last meeting, and there's obviously a decent amount of comment today. In the rule, R7 215-07C, it says very clearly, the department shall not request repayment for an expense it has approved for a specific ESA. So the rule reads very plainly on this issue, and the first part of the statement is a direct prohibition to ADE. They cannot request repayment for an expense it has approved. The second part of the rule is a more general statement. It's a more general statement that could apply to the entire set of rules, which is that none of the rules should ever violate the statutes that are governing the program. So as we heard today from so many of the families, parents cannot day-to-day live in fear that an item they received approval for is going to be unapproved, and then they will be forced to repay when ADE changes their mind. So a better solution, which I think that's what we all want, is a better solution. A better solution would be maybe a few things for ADE to improve its review procedure. Right now, there are a lot of human eyes on these approvals, and there's room for human error. So presently with Class Wallet, and I'll talk about Class Wallet here in a second since it's brought up in the report from the response from ADE, maybe discussions could happen with Class Wallet to improve that process. Future RFPs could address better technological ways so that it's not human error. There's not opportunity for human error. But on the approval process note, the approval process really does need to be described in the handbook since it's addressed here in this response. And I know we're going to talk about the handbook later. What is the administrative decision-making process that the employees go through when deciding if an item is approved or denied? It should be clearly outlined in the handbook. I think actually one of the parents mentioned in their testimony, and I jotted it down, so thank you for that. Our rule R7 to 1507B, saying that for the record, says that the department shall establish a process to review an expense, and the board needs to know what that process is, and then that should be included in the handbook. So I want to address that just to the point that Vice President Burton brought up. And then I had a few other items that I think would be really helpful since we're leaning towards approving the handbook and moving on to direct the department for future reports, if I may.
Please, yeah, give
Thank
the
you.
floor, absolutely.
Wonderful. So in the rule R7 to 1503.5, I have my rules in front of me here. It's really clear what's supposed to be in that quarterly report, which is great. And in section G, it indicates, quote, information regarding appeals filed with the board that were resolved prior to a hearing. So I noticed, can't believe I noticed it, but in that report, on page 4 of the report, it goes up to like letter F, but we're missing G and H. It appears to be missing in there. So I think that there's some items in the report on page 4 that should be included according to the rules that were not included. So maybe we could fix that for the next meeting, because we do need to know, even if the answer is none, we still need to know that that's in there. So I think that is missing. G and H are missing in that quarterly report. On page 8 of the quarterly report, under section 4.2, under denial reason category, it would be very helpful, I think, if on the next report where it says did not meet eligibility category, it's like a big number in there, did not meet eligibility category, I think it would be very, very helpful for that to be broken down by whatever category a parent was trying to qualify in. Because, if we all of a sudden see, oh, all those people, or 3/4 of them were military families, then we know that we have a problem. We have a problem that military families are confused about something. So I'd love to see that in the next quarterly report. Also, would be really helpful if on the next report that the quarterly report actually follows the numbering system that's in the rule. The rule listed like alphabetically address these issues, Department of Education, A through H. And here it took me quite some time. And I think parents might be kind of confused when they're looking at this and trying to hold the board accountable, because everything is numbered 1 through whatever. So you're having to kind of match up what is what. So that could be really helpful. Also, it'd be so helpful if the Department of Education and Director O'Brien would provide the survey and the feedback that's collected from these town halls that we've heard about that are happening. I think it's mentioned in here on page 11, I wrote down. And going forward, if there are surveys, avenues of feedback, stuff that's coming from the department, instead of listing the actual numbers, like this number of parents did this number of parents did that, it'd be really helpful if the actual comments could be included. Obviously redacted appropriately, but really helpful if those comments could be included. Just a few more things.
Sure.
Thank you. On page 13, there's a section that says 7.3 communications and trainings related to class wallet. I triple checked on this, on the links that were both listed on communications and trainings. The first one is a AZA.gov ESA class wallet. It appears there's still only one training that's actually on the website, and it's dated July 15th of 2021. So I absolutely think it could be helpful to not only potentially have more trainings with the department, just for clarity, because parents are applying for an ESA scholarship. They're getting added to the program year round. So having only one training on the department's website that's a year old, there's just a lot that changes. More could probably just be on there. I'd like to see more trainings, and we can talk more about that. And then there's a second link that talks about a video, which if you click that link, it takes you to Class Wallet, which has more information about Arizona's ESA program, because of course, Class Wallet is a third-party financial management system. They operate in a lot of different states. When I clicked through that link and it took me to the Class Wallet website, it says that there's articles there about how to utilize a program, but I could not see any of those articles. I don't know if it's an issue with Class Wallet. Maybe they're doing a website update. Maybe it was something about how I was looking at it on my computer, but I didn't actually see any training articles for parents on the Class Wallet website that I could click through. I could be wrong. So I'm just saying that, but definitely would be helpful if we can take a look at that and figure out why, and maybe make it more user-friendly for those parents. Just a few more quick things to this point. See, I talked about the ESA Quick Start Guide. That doesn't really look in there. Oh, So regarding ADEs, to my next page, regarding ADEs concern about class wallet issues, which they address in their concern, class wallet issues. I do want to address a few concerns that parents have brought up there and get a little bit more information. For Director O'Brien, for clarity's sake, this mentions that there's weekly meetings with Class Wallet that happen with the department, which is fantastic. And I thank you for all of the work that you're doing with Class Wallet. I just was wondering, who is in those meetings? How often do they take place? What format are they? Is it a 5-minute phone call with Class Wallet saying everything is good and this is a problem? What do those regular weekly meetings look like, and who is in those meetings? Help us better understand.
Terry, you're there? Yes?
Yes, sorry
Okay,
about
good.
that.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Did you catch the question from Member Clark?
I did. Member Clark, members of the board, and Superintendent Hoffman. That was a great question. In those weekly meetings, we have the Vice President, Neil, of Class Wallet. In addition, his support liaison, Julius. So those are two key people. Occasionally, we have their engineers. If and when there are any big concerns or major improvements or enhancements that we're working on, they would pull in one of the engineers. In addition, so that's the Class Wallet side. They are typically 1-hour meetings. We have a priorities list. From my side of the house, I have my leadership team, which is Sarah Raybon, who's our Director of Communication and Engagement. Also, Carla Bravo, who's our accounts manager, and Chelsea Clark, who is our program. So those are the aspects of the ESA program, because all of them interact with the Class Wallet system. Did I answer your question appropriately?
You did. Thank you, Director O'Brien.
Yeah. And by the way, real quick, I took copious notes on the report. Thank you for that feedback. We can definitely make those enhancements moving forward. I agree. And I do know the appeals was new, and I think the A through H will help, but we have that appeals data if anyone does need it for the last quarter, and we'll make sure to put it in moving forward.
Thank you, Director O'Brien. Thank you. So thank you, Director O'Brien, for that information. I think having transparency for our sake and for the parents' sake, because so many of us are new, about when these meetings are happening and how they work is extremely, extremely helpful. So thank you. One thing I wanted to address on here related to the ADE's response and concerns. In this report, there is note of concern, in this response, concern, lack of communication and limited opportunities for feedback. So one of the concerns that parents had both at the last meeting and this meeting who participated in the town halls and based on prior comment was that, you know, there's a feeling that there's a general lack of communication and limited opportunities for parent feedback. So we know that ADE is holding monthly town halls, and I know personally, having attended those as an ESA parent, I am extremely grateful for them. I think a great job is being done there, and I think it's a step in the right direction. It seems that the format is that a parent share their concern, and there could be a response by ADE, but there also may not be a response by ADE. And I think when there's no response, it feels as though parents are not being heard. They're just kind of giving their feedback and they don't really know if the department, you know, what they think about. There's not a conversation. So it would be my suggestion that more feedback be given, more interaction, not just in the frequency of those town halls, but more interaction be given by ADE so that there is a collaborative process on these issues with both the department and families. I know a lot of things that I've learned about the program, a lot of ideas that I have come from other parents who are incredibly bright and well-spoken and understand these issues really well. I think everyone would benefit from more of that feedback. Final thing I will just like to address is the concern that was mentioned in ADE's response about handbook timeline questions. The handbook was out on March 7th. And the first session was 3 days later, and the next session then was 9 days later. So there was a delay for parents to be able to read and respond. I think it's really important to remember that, as one of our speakers said today, these parents have other jobs. They have special needs children. They have a lot of things going on. So Having only a few days, even a little over a week can be difficult for the average parent. They're not at ADE doing these things every single day, looking at all these details. So I think we should continue to always err on the side of providing as much time as possible to parents, for parents to review. It is a lot. And also just continued opportunities for parents to properly provide feedback. I would encourage the department to err on this side of more feedback, more sessions, different times of the day, as much as absolutely possible. And I think you've moved in the right direction on that. I was just wondering if there would be any plan to hold additional feedback sessions from now until April regarding comments that were made today, and then additional issues that may have arisen regarding the handbook.
At this point in time, we did not have any intention to gather additional feedback. I understand what you're saying. However, we did have an overwhelming response to the survey itself, over 170 responses, and they were very lengthy responses. In addition, we read every comment, and the majority of the requests were incorporated, which did make the handbook changes quite substantive. But no, at this point, we did not have an intention to gather more, especially because the feedback we started to get, even in the 2 sessions that we held, it is very repetitive. So we understand what the families want. They want similar things, and we did our best. If you look at the version we initially gave parents, which really just addressed some of the feedback we had heard and the rules and some of the statutory things, but the changes that went to the board were quite substantial. I mean, there were over 100 items that we took from parents to listen to what they were trying to tell us they wanted.
Thank you for that response, Director Brian. That concludes my comments, but it seems like there might be a disconnect between understanding what families want, which is what I'm hearing you say, and the parent feedback that's presently being given. So I would just really encourage the department to maybe have some additional listening sessions before we have to approve as the board the handbook next month. President Court.
Thank you, Member Clark. I know you have some written comments there, just to make sure that they were all collected. If you want to share them in whatever capacity, make sure that we've caught all your comments.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, members, Member Kravickas. And I think the question I have is associated with the bigger topic. It's the associated goods related to the students with disabilities and their IEPs. Having been that parent, I know that, let's say your child is struggling with sensory issues, the school team, especially a grade school team, is going to just
Member Kravickas, is this based on the quarter report?
Yes.
Or handbook?
Yes, the associated goods and assistive technology right now, and it was part of the parent concerns that I read, so allow me to clarify it and tell me if I'm off, was that they had to continue to have their MET continuously updated to specifically specify what it is they need. And I understand that level of assurance, but again, if you're trying to attempt to fix some sensory issues, you're going to just start trying all different things and having to go back and get their MET updated all the time. I don't know what the solution is, but I think it warrants some conversation and some digging to figure out a better way to meet some of those needs without having to continually update your MET if you're just going to try a different chair.
Thank you. Other comments?
Are we commenting on the report or on the handbook? Sorry.
The report, right. We're on 3A. We will, when we're done with comments, call a vote on that, but we're on 3A. There will be an opportunity for 3I in a bit. So you're deferring, you're good. Okay. Any other comments, concerns, questions, or clarifications on 3A? I will call the vote, but first I just want to kind of echo Member Burton's comment of, we're not looking to blame, but there is frustration, and we are looking to clarify, communicate, and collaborate to get to where we need to be. So I will channel Member Clark's a better way. Let's start with a better way, and hopefully we can find that better way for everyone concerned. With that, I would entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 3A. Do I have such a motion? Do I have a second? Second. Again, for the record.
Member Kavickas.
Yes, thank you. I have a motion that's been seconded. Any further conversation?
One point of clarification.
Yes, please.
I know there was a lot shared today, and I just want to encourage again that board members continue to reach out to me and the ESA leadership team to have questions and concerns answered. It sounds like there's a lot of really detailed questions. So our team, we regularly, with state board staff, with the legal team, we're really trying to work together on this. So I just want to make sure that invitation was really clear. And then
Kavickas.
I know your first one, but yes, I remember Kavickas. Just one kind of clarification was that students do not need to update their evaluation every single time they want to get something added that they need. Just wanted to make sure that was clear that that was a policy that was changed. So but again, if there's any additional questions or concerns that I remember thinking I thought that policy changed. So just wanted to make sure that we're aware, because that would be extremely tedious for the parents and also for the school district to do a whole new evaluation anytime that you needed.
Thank you. And to that point, Mr. President, Member Kavickas, first of all, I apologize between the two agenda items and all of the comments. I may have mistakenly remember where I read something. But to that point, if that's the case, then it probably needs to be better clarified in one of the documents we read or better communicated to the parents, because I remember reading that quite a few times.
Okay, we have a motion that's been seconded. Any further comments? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of approving consent agenda item 3A, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay, Member Clark, would you like to address consent agenda item 3I?
President Report, thank you. I would like to address item I off of the consent agenda, which is the presentation of the Empowerment Scholarship Handbook for the 22-23 school year. I do have some comments. I will go quickly on them. I will make sure to look at Director Williams to see if it's time to wrap it up or move on or get guidance on my next steps. So I am going to be specific because I do think that that's beneficial for the department to know where I'm coming from regarding these comments. Let me pull out my draft handbook as well. And I am reviewing right now in front of me the draft handbook that we were given on assembly, not the, I guess, red line version. Thank you. Draft handbook. I do think I would like to note very quickly that I discovered, I'm not sure if anyone else discovered this, that the handbook that was uploaded in assembly, if you happen to look online or for parents or others who are listening, this has the same date on it, March 28th, but the one that's online on the ADE website also says March 28th, but it's actually for March 1st. So the page numbers I'm going off of are the ones the board members have for clarification for those watching. So
Member Clark, can I just share
yes,
before you get started? I do want to remind everyone in the room and on the board that this item is for information only today, and the board is not taking action other than to inform and direct ADE on areas. So just to clarify what we're doing here today. So I apologize for interrupting. Please go ahead.
No, that's great. Thank you, President Report. So on page 9 of the draft handbook, there is a chart referencing approved spending categories. There's a section there that says curriculum, and the description states, quote, a course of study for content areas or grade levels, including supplemental education materials required or recommended by the curriculum, approved by the department. There is then a footnote at the very bottom, footnote 8, which cites Arizona Revised Statute 152402. Quick point there, I believe that should read 152401 parentheses 2. So that could be something that could be investigated and possibly changed. But it goes on to summarize, quote, supplemental materials must be required or recommended by the curriculum. So this is this kind of issue again. The current 2021-2022 handbook on page 8. So that's the current handbook that we use as ESA parents. So on the same page, there is a footnote that's on the bottom there, and it's footnote 11. And it references the rules definition of supplemental materials, okay, which is R72-1501-14, which states, quote, Supplemental materials means relevant materials directly related to the course of study for which they are being used to introduce content and instructional strategies that enhance, complement, enrich, extend, or support the curriculum. So this provides a complete picture of what the statute and the rule will allow. However, it appears that the new draft handbook eliminates that footnote that's in our present handbook that shows the rule. So that's very confusing to parents, because a parent is looking at this new handbook saying, oh, I just see this law here. Supplemental materials must be required or recommended in the curriculum. So it would be my encouragement that both be included and that the original footnote from the current handbook should not be deleted. It should stay the same. And I always want to say it seems on this, because again, I could have missed something in what was printed or what's here. So it seems that it's been deleted, and I would encourage that it stays there. The rule defines a supplemental material. Makes sense it would be in there for parents so that they understand. I'll continue. On page 17, it links to a list of ESA allowable items. Under education materials, it says this is a list of approved educational materials which do not require curriculum. This list is not exhaustive. See our website that is updated regularly. And then there's a link to ESA allowable items. I think that this list and the idea behind the list is absolutely fantastic. And I personally am very thankful the department does this, because this is a way that I can, without having to take up the department's time and ask for approval, find out what are items that are just point blank already approved. My question for Director O'Brien is, it says updated regularly. I think I would like clarification on who updates that list and how often, and maybe when was the last time it was updated, so we know.
Great question, Member Clark and members of the board, Superintendent Hoffman. Our response on that one is we update, well, for a period of time, I don't feel the staff was updating regularly. However, since those 5 errors, we have implemented new training. We've done more cross training. We've done, we have daily meetings, 2-hour daily meetings. So as we are approving items, we are updating the list simultaneously. I am going to be very transparent in saying I believe we went through a changeover of staff. We've had quite a bit of turnover. The person who was previously responsible for that task was gone. The new person was not trained to do that, but we're back on track. So I do apologize. There was a gap in time. The list was not being maintained, but today it is updated daily, if needed.
Thank you. So Director O'Brien, just to clarify, so from here on out, ESA parents can have confidence knowing that that list is being updated daily.
Correct. As long as we have new items to add, correct.
Absolutely,
Yes.
understood. Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. I'll continue on. So on to page 23 of the draft handbook. The question came up of associated goods and assistive technology. In the draft handbook, there are 3 bullet points of what a parent needs to provide so that their student can purchase items that fall under associated goods and technology. In the rules, R72-1505B4, it says a parent shall provide to the department, 1, the special education course of study, service, or educational need that the good or service is associated with, emphasis on associated with, or continuing on, may provide the most current IEP, evaluation, or letter from a qualified service provider. So, you know, like if I have a speech therapist, they've got a license, they could provide a letter. The current handbook, the present handbook that ESA parents follow, contains this language from that rule, which I think is great. The draft handbook appears to limit this rule and says that a parent needs documentation about, quote, a special education course of study, service, or educational need with which the good or service is required. It appears that the draft handbook changes the language from is associated with to required. And it also says the most current 504 met IEP or evaluation must indicate a specific need for the good or service. So it does seem that the draft handbook may be rewriting the rule and making it more restrictive for parents. And I think that could be a narrowing of the state board's rule on associated goods. The language really should be exactly as the rule indicates, which is retaining the current language from the current handbook. The challenge of this, I think as Member Griffiths was starting to go after, is that we don't want to create a burden for parents nor the school district that are going to make a parent have to go back and get an updated MET. It wouldn't be a 504 and IEP because those are only if you're actually enrolled in the school, but we don't want to create that undue burden. We also don't want to create a burden where we're having to pay or use our ESA funds to go find a therapist that can say, you know, oh, here, I'll write a letter for you, for your child to be able to purchase this. I did want to give a quick example because we're dealing with special needs and these very technical things that are so important to ESA parents. I think it'd be helpful for the board to understand what I'm referring to regarding an associated good. So my two oldest kids are on ESA, have dyslexia. They got on because they had an IEP from a public school district. They actually have an official diagnosis of dyslexia from a neuropsychologist, but the diagnosis paperwork, nor the MET, which is the initial document, nor the IEP specifically mentioned something that's been useful to a lot of dyslexic kids, which is a reading pen, where you literally scan something and it reads it to you. Okay, so nowhere is that ever mentioned, but it's clearly an associated good. It's clearly an associated good. The rule allows this. It seems that the draft handbook would not allow this, and this is something that parents are very concerned about. That's something I wanted to draw to the department's attention and something I think that a lot of parents are very concerned about. I'd like to continue on if that's okay.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you. On page 44, I tried to do this in order so we're not getting too crazy over here. On page 44, there is discussion of MCC codes and reimbursement. It's been brought up before in last month's feedback and also this month's feedback that there is a problem where a parent may need to purchase an item like an approved online class. So something that is approved by the department, approved, not in violation of statute, but they're unable to do it because of a restricted MCC code. And MCC code, and I'm open to correction, it stands for Merchant Credit Code. So when you start a business, you say what your code is, and when we use or any parent uses their ESA debit card, it doesn't work just anywhere. It's only on codes that are allowed by the department. So we know, and I've actually understood this issue more recently, that reimbursement is not an option for parents, especially for very expensive therapies and other items and classes for special needs families. So the handbook does state, unfortunately, the department cannot make MCC code exceptions. But if items are clearly educational and they meet the statutory requirement, I would like to better understand why an exception cannot be made. It is my understanding that some exceptions have been made in the past. And so if that's the case, it would seem that the handbook should explain how an MCC code restriction can be lifted and what the process is for making that request. Continuing on to page 46, the draft handbook reads, quote, "The department will provide an email notice to each parent of when and how the department will conduct reviews of expenses and audits pursuant to Rule 72, 1508 A and B. The rule states, quote, "The department shall provide annual notice to each parent of when and how the department will conduct reviews of expenses and audits." The handbook language also says on page 46, quote, "The department is authorized to audit all expenditures and may request further information if needed from the account holder at any time." So I'd like to know when and how, Director O'Brien, does the department currently carry out audits, and how are the parents and the board notified?
Member Clark, members of the board, currently we are not doing audits. We have worked very closely with the Auditor General's office. It was one of their recommendations to move to a risk-based audit approach. We have begun to work with them. They've given us some guidelines. We have reached out to a couple different state agencies that also do risk-based audits. We're having a challenging time, aside from the Department of Revenue, finding another agency that does something similar. So at this time, we are not auditing accounts at all. We will be continuing to develop a plan. Once the plan, and we're hoping by the next fiscal year, the first quarter, come up with a plan, vet that through the Auditor General's office, obviously have communication with the state board on any concerns. We're hoping to do more of a phased in approach versus an all or none. And that's simply because we did bring this issue up, risk-based audits, after the auditors approached us again on what was our status. Parents expressed great concern. We surveyed parents. We got over 230 responses, and parents were very concerned about the audit approach. And we're looking at their concerns as we start to develop this potential implementation plan. At this point, I'm not convinced that we're ready, but we will definitely try to develop some type of plan in the future.
Director O'Brien, thank you so much for that. To that point, the main thing I wanted to ensure is that based on the rule, with that process that you mentioned is established for the risk-based audit, that we include that in the handbook, since it seems the rule says that notice must be given. So thank you so much for that. I'd like to move on from my comment, since I already addressed this point about repayment in the previous issue, and move on to page 28 of the draft handbook under educational and psychological evaluations. My own family's actually run into this issue. So it states that only kids who are on ESA with a MET, a 504 plan, or an IEP can use their funds to get an evaluation. Current ESA kids who are on the program and they're not qualified, they're not in one of those special education categories. So like I have children that are on ESA because they're a sibling. They're a sibling of an existing recipient, or you have military families that don't have any type of special need. In order to get that child qualified to be able to use their ESA for even something as minor as speech services, we have to go through a very lengthy and burdensome process where we actually have to go back to the public school district, who is like, who are you and what are you doing? So we often have to explain why we're there. We have to use of their time, energy, and resources to evaluate our child, so that our child, and they're likely not even getting any more funding, but just so that their funds can now be used for special education services. So I noticed that in ARS 152403, I wrote I, but I think it's actually J. It says the department shall contract with an independent third party for the purposes of determining whether a qualified student is eligible to receive educational therapies or services pursuant to section 152402 B or C. So Director O'Brien, how does a parent with a child on the program right now, a child that is not qualified under a special needs category, utilize the independent third party evaluator to get their child evaluated to find out if they do have a learning disability that would allow their funds to be used for special education services?
Currently, there is no contract or contracts in place for the third party. Prior to my start in July, I know the department did put out an RFP or an RFQ. There were 0 responses to that third party evaluator. It does come up occasionally, but at this point, we do not have anything other than if a family, parent or guardian wants that evaluation, they would have to go through their local school district.
Thank you, Director O'Brien. If ADE has been unable to contract with a third party, independent third party, to determine whether a qualified student is eligible to receive special education therapies or services, would it make sense to give parents the option to find their own evaluator so that we're not burdening the school districts, and then the department would cover that like they would normally cover a third party evaluator?
I do not believe that's an option, and I don't want to quote specifically, but I believe there is guidance under IDEA and other statutory requirements and the ESA program itself, where the language alludes to, and please don't quote me because I'm stretching here. I wasn't quite prepared for this question, but I could get you a better answer. Long and short of it is my understanding the way the statutes are written and some of the legislation that we would have to have that either the third party and or the public school district. And that's to stay in compliance with other things as well. Because if you think about it, the ESA program, if a student is eligible in a public school, right, to get those benefits, we need to have pretty consistent regulations between ESA and the public school system.
Thank you, Director O'Brien. Director Williams, would it be appropriate for me to ask for clarification on that issue for the board before the next meeting?
I think you already have.
Like with the legal piece, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And yes, it would be, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A few other short things, and I just want to thank board members for giving me the time to be able to walk through these issues. I think they're important. I just wanted to take this time for Director O'Brien to see these challenges with the handbook. Just a few more quick items. On page 12, the draft handbook states that hiring family members is prohibited, but then proceeds to say that ESA funds cannot be used to hire immediate family members. Director O'Brien, is there a definition in the handbook of immediate family members?
No, there is not.
Could we include a definition in the handbook?
Absolutely.
And to that point, I did look up two things that could be helpful in making that definition. ARS 15421J2, it does give an example in our current statute, quote, immediate family means individuals who are married to each other or any children of those individuals. And I mention that because I think sometimes the definition can be incredibly broad of what an immediate family member means. And I'd also like to reference the department, take a look at Arizona's Department of Economic Security's website. Recently, DDD, the Department of Developmental Disabilities, allowed family members who qualify, so not immediate family members, but family members who qualify to become direct care workers for those disabled children. And I would never have even thought about this before. I'm thankful that DES and DDD did this because since COVID, a lot of parents are obviously very concerned, especially with a lot of these special needs parents who also maybe have a concurrent medical diagnosis. It's difficult to either go out somewhere to receive those really important services and therapies, but also sometimes it's very difficult to find therapists that will then come to your home if they weren't doing that already. So if a family member that was not an immediate family member had the therapy license or the degree or any of the things that would normally be required for us, it would seem that families should be able to utilize those services. So continuing on handbook page 3, there is a discussion about how to get assistance in escalated complaints. But based on parent feedback, it seems that that link just goes to the regular ESA help desk. So from a parent perspective, I think they may feel that there actually is no true escalation, that it's just going to the regular parent feedback type of link. And I could be wrong about that. So I think that we should detail the actual escalation process that's on ADE side for clarity and transparency for the parents. And that I think that would be beneficial for the handbook to just clearly spell out that administrative process that is happening regarding assistance and escalation on a complaint. Let's see, the next point I would like to make, which I think was brought up earlier and something I hadn't thought about, so I'm grateful, is that I'd like to see plans to translate the handbook into Spanish for those families that may need it. And I think that was probably on your list, Director O'Brien.
Yep.
And then my last question or comment, because I did not see it in the handbook, is Director O'Brien, could you give us a latest on what is happening with the Parent Advisory Council? Because if that is still happening, if it's still something that parents can participate in, it's something that we probably would want to include in the handbook, especially for new parents.
Yeah, Member Clark, I thought it was in there, so I could be
And
wrong.
it could be, so that's why I'm like, it seems.
No, I believe I can search for it. Yeah, I believe it is in there. It is still active. Currently, we meet with them, I believe, 3 times a year. The charter was updated. I'm looking, sorry. It's a big handbook.
It is.
So I guess the request is that that information be included in the handbook. Is that correct, Member Clerk?
Thank you, President
Okay.
Morris.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts, Member Clerk?
That concludes my thoughts.
All
Thank you,
right,
President
appreciate
Morris.
it. Yeah, very helpful. Any other thoughts, comments from to my right? Yeah, please.
Thank you, President Court. Thank you, Mr. Clark. First off, I just want to thank all the parents for sharing your input. It's really helpful to hear from ESA parents. It's helpful to hear from you. For next month, can we ensure that the ESA handbook concerns are addressed in consultation with the parents? I think that word came up a lot today. And I think that, you know, there's great work that's being done by the department. And I also want to thank you for all of this hard work, because this is a very big handbook and it's a lot. But at the end of the day, we're here to help all kids and to make sure that they have the necessary resources that they need. So is that possible?
Yes. Are you requesting that?
I'm requesting that.
Please, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments? Please.
Member Clay, my biggest concern is always us working as a good system where we're interdependent and where we talk to each other and we realign as we continue to get new information. So I really appreciate listening, and I appreciate our future collaboration and realignment of the ESA system. So thank you everyone for all your hard work and enlightening me on a lot of things that I'd never known before. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any thoughts or comments?
I had.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Member Haley, I have a few comments or questions, mostly more for clarification. I will follow just a few observations. I assume the next time you receive a copy of the handbook in draft form, that acronyms, periods, things like curricula versus curriculums will be corrected throughout, that a specific attention will sort of a space between words, those types of things will be addressed. A few things that, and I think some of the parents raised it today, some of the definitions I found are at least somewhat vague. So if you look on page 35 under disallowed spending categories, and you look under computer, hardware, and other technological devices, perhaps Director O'Brien can answer this question. Software, is that software as in like Microsoft Word and the suite of services, or is that software as in I'm going to buy like a science curriculum or math or that kind of thing? If there are exceptions or additional clarification, I think it would be really helpful, certainly for us as board members, but definitely for parents as they're trying to navigate what their options are. And then other things, I noticed that I think on page 36, disallowed items, there were things like, I can't remember where I saw it, might have been our instruments. I think instruments like rentals are allowed if you attend a private school, but is that permitted if you are going to teach guitar? A parent mentioned it earlier, you're going to teach guitar, is that allowed or disallowed item? And perhaps maybe we could have some consistency between what is permitted if a child attends a private school using the ESA and what a child is able to use there in a home learning environment. You're done. That might be it on us. All right. That's it, at least for now. Oh, last thing is just, I think just definitions in general. If there was a comprehensive list of definitions, as what, I think that could be very, very helpful. I have a policy background, so certain things are intuitive to me, but if I didn't, I would be sort of at a loss and understanding these different things. So I think that's it for me right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Haley. Other thoughts, comments, concerns?
Thank you.
Quite welcome. Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion to accept consent agenda. No.
It's an information only. There's no.
Okay. So I withdraw my request for consent.
We may want to like sum it up, President Corr. So Director O'Brien Would it be beneficial for your office or Superintendent Hoffman for board staff to collect some of the board members' thoughts today and give that to you?
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Okay, we can do that for you.
We've taken a lot of notes too, at least I have, so absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Executive Director Williams, and really for both the items that we pulled off the consent agenda. We shared a lot of information to make sure that was adequately collected, accurately and adequately collected. You know, any written materials you wanted to share or double check, we want to make sure that that's conveyed appropriately. So thank you. A lot of good conversation, a lot of good thoughts. I appreciate it. Do folks need a break?
Yes.
Well, that's the one thing we can agree on, certainly. So yeah, so let's, I got about 10 minutes after. Can we try to keep it to about 10 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, very good. Then we'll start back up at 12:20. The coffee got the best of it. get us cranked up again, yeah?
Yes. We get cranky.
No.
We're live.
Fired up, and maybe we get fired up.
Live.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So I'll call us back into session at 12:20. Move us on to agenda item 4, which is the second call of the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items on today's general session. Once again, all speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone, Executive Director Williams, for this call to the public?
President Core, we do not.
Okay, then we will move right into the general session. Number 5, I believe 5A has been removed, so I'll move us right on to 5B. This is for information only, presentation and discussion on the draft social media and cell phone use best practices for educators. Director Williams.
Thank you, President Core, members of the board. Item 5B is the presentation and discussion regarding Senator Boyer's legislative bill from last session pertaining to the board creating a social media and cell phone use best practices for educators document. As a reminder to the board and to the public, the board first saw this agenda item last month at the February board meeting, in which board staff then sent a survey out to the field. We did not get a robust survey response. I believe we had maybe 13 individuals who responded to the board survey. So we'll continue to push our ABC group partners to get information out to their associations and constituents. There has been some discussion from last board meeting about tightening up some of the language within the best practice document, looking into some of the bullet points, specifically H and I, as it pertains to any type of First Amendment speech violation. So we'll work with the AG's office, this guy Lou right here, to assist with some of that language for the board. And then finally, most of the information that will be contained within the best practices for educators document. Most school districts and charter schools already have a similar policy on the book for their staffers. So again, members, we are just looking at it again today. If there are questions, I'm more than happy to respond to those. However, the board will be accepting and approving this at the meeting in April, and it will be nice and beautiful and PDF'd for the members. We'll stick a logo on there.
Any questions for Executive Director Williams? Okay. Thank you, Alicia. So I'll move us on to 5C, presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the recommendation to deny the Parents, Guardians, KP's appeal and affirm the Arizona Department of Education's denial of eligibility for the Empowerment Scholarship account for appeal case number 00226. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the administrative law judge to deny the Parent, Guardian, KB's ESA appeal number 00226 and affirm the department's denial of eligibility for the Empowerment Scholarship account? Do I have such a motion? Burton, thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you.
Member Campbell.
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you. Any discussion, comments?
I just want to clarify, this really had more to do with.
Member Burton and members of the board, if any board member wishes to discuss the substance of this appeal, we will have to go into executive session as I often notify the board for this agenda item.
Not necessarily.
You sure? Yeah. Okay. I have a motion that has been seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. I will move as motion passes. I'll move us on to 5D. This is presentation and discussion of legislative affairs. The board may take action to support, oppose, or remain neutral on specific legislative proposals. And Director Williams, I suspect the catcher is going to have some good stuff to share with us.
Yes,
All right.
President, core members of the board, Deputy Director.
President
Catcher, the
Core,
floor is yours.
thank you, President Core, Vice President Burton, and members. As Executive Director Williams stated, as you mentioned, this is the item for a legislative update. You'll have this item every month that you meet, every meeting that you meet during the legislative session. And it'll go away and then it'll come back again just like spring. So right now, because you are joined, most of you anyways, the quorum of you joined in the middle of the legislative session, I'm going to provide some background and context here that we wouldn't normally provide. Usually it's just the bills, we talk about them, and if you want to take a position, you can. If not, we move on. I'll take a little bit more time today to give some context, some information on the process, some information on where we're at in the legislature, and then we'll get into the bills. Just for the board's relationship with the legislature, so I'm starting, this sounds a little bit like a civics lesson, I apologize, or you know this already, I also apologize. So far this year, the legislature's introduced about 1,800 bills, which is more or less par for the course. And of course, this body, the State Board of Education, can take positions on those bills just like any other entity or individual as the board, as the agency, or in this case, the constitutionally created board. To do that, the board has a legislative committee that's established in board policy, which is currently made up of board leadership, the president, and vice president. They meet with staff every week. We go over the bills, and that legislative committee decides whether or not to take positions on those bills, whether to pursue amendments, what kind of conversations to have, and what sort of ways the board should position. They do that at the using the board's priorities that were adopted for the legislative session and input from board members throughout the year. Now, that legislative committee can take positions of support, neutral, or not take a position at all. If there's 1,800 bills, the board's not taking positions on all these bills. That legislative committee cannot oppose legislation on its own. That requires, by board policy, a full vote of the board on agenda items like this. So you know that committee does not have the authority to weigh in opposed on things. Those positions, for those of you who aren't familiar, that literally means that staff, myself as the board's representative, goes down to the legislature and signs into their system on behalf of the board in support or neutral or opposed if the board decides to do that. Historically, historically, it's not that historic. It's the board sessions that I've been with the board has not really been opposed on any legislation. Part of that is just I think the philosophy that the board has had over those 4 years in terms of just wanting to take a more constructive approach, providing information to members, trying to make things implementable and fixable. If we're opposing things, that means we're trying to kill that legislation. And I think that's something that the board over the 4 years that's just not the approach they wanted to take. Of course, that's your decision every time we have these discussions. It's also, just for context, generally more in line with positions of state agencies and boards. Boards and state agencies tend to not sign in opposed on things quite as often as other groups. So it happens, but it's just not as frequent. So I think that's good for process up to this point. That's sort of the quick 30. When we get to the retreat over the summer, we can relook at that process. If there's things you want to do differently, or if you want to have input, or there will also be potentially reworking of the legislative committee if that's what you want to do. But that's kind of how we're up to this point as the board policy is laid out so far. Now, where we're at in the legislative session, we're on almost day 80. Constitutionally, the legislature meets 100 days, but that deadline doesn't really mean much because the legislature by a majority vote can just keep going beyond 100 days. It's almost like an aspirational goal. It can also meet less than that. Really, the big thing that the legislature has to get done, of course, is the budget, and the big deadline for that is the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. And last year, I think we went right up to June 30th. So all signs point to pushing that is up to the brink as well. So 78 days sounds like we're almost done, but it looks like we're probably not. What it does mean, though, that we're almost 88 days in is that it's still we're at a milestone, which is that most of the committee work has been done up to this point. So all the regular committees have mostly considered all their bills. The appropriations committee, one of them is meeting right now, and there's a meeting tomorrow, and then maybe later this week as they just try to crank through what's left. That means committees moving forward, if they do meet, will be hopefully for executive nominations, especially for you all, specifically in Senate Education. If there's any special legislation from, special session legislation, if a special session is called, or the budget, and it'll go through the appropriations committee. The good news for you all, what that means is that the list of bills for you all to look at now has gotten a lot smaller. And for those of you who are new, that means you should thank your predecessors who had to look through a much longer list up to this point. So to the bills themselves, and then I'll pause and be available for questions or if you want to discuss any of them. We provided a list which is on Simply. If you logged in, you have to log in to view it. It's confidential. It is a little different than how we usually provide the list. We tried to make it a little more digestible and not have quite as much information. We didn't go into detail on every single bill. Usually we provide a little more detail. Tried to keep it a little more high level and also tried to give you an idea of what the board's positions have been on those bills. There's really just two that I just want to draw your attention to that I think are probably pertinent, and maybe three actually, considering the conversations that we've already had today. The first is House Bill 2026. I want to draw your attention to it because that's actually the board's bill. So that's the 7 of you who are new. Congratulations, you're the new owners of a bill. That's also congratulations, like 2/3 of the way there. So that bill is around early literacy. It contains some of the recommendations that the board adopted around early literacy in December. Not all of them. The board had a pretty big list of recommendations that included things like funding and interventions for schools that had struggling readers year over year. The reason this bill doesn't contain all those recommendations is that those other recommendations would have a fiscal impact, would be part of the budget conversation. So the board decided to go with this legislation that is a little narrower in impact. And I think fair to say probably not as ambitious or bold as all those other recommendations, but something the board still wanted to pursue. It really quickly, it requires all LEAs, local education agencies, so districts and charters, to submit their literacy plans every year rather than every other year for some of them, about half of them. It makes some tweaks to retention requirements in statute. One of them is actually a codification of current practice, and the other is to get up into best practice with how we do EL identification and acquisition, English learning, sorry. And then the other one's a technical change to fix a bit of a draft in the state from last year. So that's the board's bill. Representative Udall was good enough to sponsor us for that. That for us through both education committees just needs one more vote in the Senate and a signature. The other bill is it's actually in a couple places, but it's Operation Excellence, and this is well, in one version it's in House Bill 2808. It was Stryker was proposed in the Senate on a different bill, but it was struck off the agenda. But this bill is the governor's initiative, and it provides Operation Excellence over a 3-year period, which our board, this board, will be charged with administering for those 3 years. $150 per student, and DNF schools, and simplifying here, but essentially DNF schools who've been DNFs for 2 years in a row would have to select a partner from a list of partners this board would adopt, or if they were a C school that had a high percentage of FRL, they could select their own mentor, enter the program, get the funding. We would oversee those school improvement turnaround activities, essentially. And then after 3 years, the funding goes away, but then more significant interventions start to kick in under statute for those schools that they did not improve. Now, if they're a charter school, they're probably getting shut down by their sponsor, the charter board. For most of them, it's the charter board. If they're a district school, then there are certain interventions our board of the school would be required to take, which could include turning over operations of that school to what's called an achievement district school, which is essentially an A school that has certain financial and other measurements. As you can imagine, that's a fairly, I oversimplify that. But that's a fairly large piece of legislation moving through, requires our board to have a pretty significant responsibility. It is the governor's initiative, and it's going to be in the budget regardless of what's on that agenda. But, well, if it's anywhere, it will be in the budget, or it won't be. Those bills would have stopped at some point. So obviously monitoring that, we've been in consultation with the components of the governor's office, the sponsor, and suggested multiple amendments that have gone on. So, you know, still go on. Just something to be aware of that if that does pass, that's pretty significant responsibility our will be tasked. And then finally, in light of some of the conversations today, I thought I'd bring up Senate Bill 1657, which is sponsored by Senator Boyer, which includes, I think the headline on it is that it has ESA expansion, but there's also several other programmatic changes to that legislation. Some of those programmatic changes were things that this board adopted and asked Senator Boyer or the legislature, but Senator Boyer, I think we used legislation considered. And there are some of the things that have come up, like in the comments you heard today, or through the rulemaking process that parents have brought up, or other people have brought up around the program, that the board was unable and is unable to address and rule because maybe there's statutory restraints or the way the statute's worded. So the board provided some of those issue areas, and the legislation addresses some of them. So that I will stop there, and I'm happy to answer questions, happy to discuss things. You're not obligated. My feelings won't be hurt if you don't want to discuss anything on here. We don't run through every piece of legislation and take a position. If you want to do that, I guess that's the board's prerogative. But that's not something historically done. So my feelings won't be hurt if you just want to move on and try to get out of here. But otherwise, I'm also happy and available to answer questions.
Thank you. Catcher, any questions? Yes, please. Member Haley.
Sure, no, Member Haley, Deputy Director, it's David, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. For Senate Bill 1657, I'm able to go at greater detail. I haven't read the policy, but can we refer back to a second ago we had the we said whether or not we could see the recommendation by the number 5C. It was the denial of PSA for would that particular policy be able to address situations like that, or is that something that we need?
President Core and Member Haley, that is something that the board could have conversations with the legislature about, because that is as generally speaking as I can without going back to another agenda item. But no, you're fine. The number of days needed to in a public school to qualify for those students who have to meet that is a pretty hard and fast statutory deadline. That we had some discussions with. The definitions, for example, of curricula or supplemental materials. And the statute is pretty vague in many cases on what that is. The rule attempts to provide some more specificity to try to pin that down, and then the rule tries to establish some processes to consider those types of things. In this particular case, it's pretty hard and fast, like 45 days. So it's something the board wanted. I will say that was reduced last year from 100 days to 45 days, so it's already been chunked down. There was one issue that the board had, it's not that the board had identified it, other people had identified it, the board recommended was that to qualify under this, you can do 45 days in a public school, or if you're in an online program, the statute has a corresponding number of hours. The legislature, when they reduced it from 100 days to 45 days, did not correspondingly reduce the number of hours. So the board did ask the legislature to consider maybe reducing those number of hours, which I'll go into detail, but may or may not have helped in that particular circumstance.
Anyone else? Okay. Please.
Mr. Chairman, Member Kervigas.
Deputy Director Caden, thank you for raising 2026. It wasn't on my radar screen. I hadn't seen it. But I'm wondering, there were a series of recommendations that the board adopted into the Move On When Reading Report last year that were intended to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. And I'm a little sad that it looks like none of them got into this bill. And I'm wondering what the thought process was. Some of them were just simple reporting requirements. And the one probably that I thought was most important is actually requiring that all of the assessment screeners are accessible, which right now there's districts are not having to demonstrate that at all. And I looked online last night and the pre-approved screeners online don't have any mention of that as well either. I'm wondering why none of those came into the bill.
President Report, Member Rebecca's, I think, let me go back and look to see if we had specific discussions about it. I think we might have just decided that maybe that was something we could administratively work with the Department of Insurance. I also wonder if we might have had some concerns about roping in assessments and maybe some of the political challenges that might create. But I'm
And I appreciate that. My understanding is that that is all required under federal law regardless. But the recommendation could be that the literacy plan, the plan has to include their demonstration of how the ones they selected already meet the federal requirements. And the other one that I would have thought would have been super non-controversial, I know it's a technical term, super non-controversial, would have been the expanded reporting requirements by disability. And that follow-up report, I'm looking at one of the other recommendations was that we analyze the long-term outcomes for students who've been exempted. 10 years later, we've never gone back and looked at what happens to the kids who were exempted. And we know historically those are the lion's share, those are students with disabilities. So I think that's a critical research opportunity that we need moving forward to actually know how these programs are working.
Yes, President Corey, I'll double check and look back at that. And I also think I think it's something that even if it doesn't make it into the bill, is probably something part of try to advocate for because the board does have some flexibility on what we can request on this literacy plan. Let me get that.
Any other questions for Deputy Director Baden?
I'm sorry, can you follow? Just kind of moving forward so you'll know where I'm coming from. I totally appreciate that. And sometimes it's easier to go work with people behind the scenes, but sometimes it's really important to be intentional and explicit. Because one of the things I think I've learned over these 20-25 years is all doesn't always mean all. All people don't always think it means all, and sometimes you just really have to be intentional, especially as administrations turn and change.
Deputy Director Baden, no June vacation plans? You're holding off till July? Is that what you're telling us?
President Corr, actually, no, I plan on leaving and then letting Executive Director Williams take the helm. She asked me to add more to the plan.
Yeah.
So I served.
Thank you, Catcher. I always appreciate it. I will move us on to item 6. This is the call to the public as it relates to certification enforcement actions. My understanding is we have no speakers. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do have 3 speakers for item 8.
Correct. Okay, very good. Thank you. And then I will move us on to item 7. These are consent agenda items as it relates to certification enforcement actions. The consent agenda for enforcement actions can and ideally will be taken as a single motion. So do I have a motion to approve item 7A1 through 7A7, 7B1, and 7C1 through 7C3? Do I have such a motion? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Member Clay, second.
Thank you so much. Any discussion, conversation? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Call for a vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay, then I'll move us on to our final call to the public, item 8. This is the time for the public to speak on items on the board's general session for enforcement action. And consistent with earlier call to the public, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Director Williams, I understand we have 3 such speakers.
Yes, President Corwood, one late registration. So we will honor her request. First up, we have Cypress Kademus. I believe that individual is virtual.
That is correct, Executive Director Williams.
Okay.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, so in behalf of Cypress May Kadimas, my wife, she decided not to give a statement for she is traumatized of this situation. So I would like to give a comment on this item, if it's okay.
Yes, please continue.
Okay, so first and foremost, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Kenley Kadimas. I am from the Philippines, the husband of Cypress May Kadimas. I am a licensed teacher for 7 years, a certified teacher, and a 5th grade teacher here in Sanders Elementary School for almost a year. Despite of the decision of the PPAC's recommendation, we would like to say thank you for this opportunity to give us a chance to speak and to express our feelings. We know that despite facing this kind of situation, we are traumatized and happy, especially with the decision and recommendation of the PPACs. From the start, we showed all the evidence, recommendations from our previous and current principals, and also with the full support of our respected school superintendent. It was heartbreaking that our principal cried and begged during the hearing. We are telling the truth, but it ends like we are shouting on the wind that no one is listening. I will keep on telling this, that it was a misunderstanding. It was my fault that my wife suffered a lot, with all the consequences which supposedly will not result in this situation. We don't have the chance to correct everything, for we don't know what are the proceedings in this country. Now we are here fighting for what is right and telling for what is the truth behind judgment. You know what? When it comes to working, we are proud to say that we are both professionals. We're both talented in many ways in school. We exceed our scores for our students, and we are both scored as highly effective teachers during the classroom evaluation. It's really hurt knowing that we are a family in this profession, and they wanted to end our dreams. Recommending for a 2-year suspension or more is not a solution. In fact, why don't you give us a chance to prove and to show you what is the best in us, that teaching is our passion, which my wife does not deserve on these consequences. We are hoping for your consideration and chances. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Next up in person, we have Mary Jennifer Friend.
Mary Jennifer. I could ask you to come to the podium, if you would.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I had my, the PPAC came up with their decision or recommendation, and they came up with 5 years. I've taught for 20 years, and I've never once done anything that had jeopardized. How did I get to all the way to 5? Yeah, I mean, it is kind of what I'm thinking. And I mean, I work with a population of children that have been pulled from their regular schools, and there are high, trauma kids. I don't want to leave them. And I don't know that it would be in their best interest for me to leave. There was an issue with what brought me here, but there are so many outside circumstances to that there was never really the whole story told. That, and I was out of work for 1.5 years with my fingerprint clearance card going through this process. And so I wasn't working, and I can't afford a lawyer back on like 4 paychecks. So I mean, this whole situation has just been, it's been super hard. I want to get back to teaching. I went back to teaching, and I thought I was capable of going back to teaching, but I didn't realize the complexity of this of the teaching certificate. I just want to teach. You know, I mean, instead of taking me out of teaching for 5 years, put me back at Osborne for, another 10, I'll take it. I mean, I have nothing in my file except letters of recommendations and observations. I just want to teach, and I want to go back to my kids and not have somebody taking it away, kind of looming over my head. I mean, it's gone on for 2 years. I just want to get back to teaching. That's all I've done for the last 20 years. I'm not really interested in reinventing myself at 50. I like teaching. I still turn that key every morning and smile when I walk into my classroom. And we're in a state where people are leaving teaching and they're not smiling. And why would you want to get rid of the one that is smiling and does a fabulous job at what she's doing? I would beg of you guys to consider maybe not taking. The state had no opinion. I didn't have a lawyer, and the PPAC came up with 5. I just ask you to consider giving me back my certificate in good standing.
Thank you, Mary Jennifer. I appreciate
Thank you.
President Report, that concludes the request to speak.
Thank you, Executive Director Williams. I'll move us on then to item 9, general session certification enforcement. 9A refers to the presentation, discussion, and possible action to approve the negotiated settlement agreement for Christina Nope, case number C 2021-012584R. Do I have a motion to approve item 9A1?
Member Clark, so moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any conversation or discussion regarding 9A1? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Move on to 9B. This is the presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to suspend the teaching certificate of Cyphus Cardamas, case number C 2020-002329, with conditions for a period of 2 years. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendations of the PPAC and suspend any and all teaching certificates for Cypress Cardamas for a period of 2 years with the condition of successful completion of an anger management course and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion? Thank you. Do I have a second?
Member Clark, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion or conversation around item 9? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Passes. Moves on to 9C, the presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the teaching certificate of Mary Jennifer Friend, case number C 2020-002084 for a period of 5 years. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusional law, and recommendations of the PPAC and revoke any and all teaching certificates held by Mary Jennifer Friend for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion?
Member Clark, so moved.
Thank you, Member Clark. Do I have a second?
Member Clay, second.
Clay, thank you. Any conversation or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call a vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. The motion passes. Move us on to 9D, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendation of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the teaching certificate of Dash Trap Catch Hep, case number C 2021-011530 for a period of 5 years. Do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke any and all teaching certificates held by Dash Rap Catch Hap for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion? Thank you so much. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion or conversation? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Move us on to 9E, which is the presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to suspend the teaching certificates of Nathan Powell, case number C 2020-000724, with conditions for a period of 2 years. Do I have a motion to adopt the finding of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the PPAC and suspend any and all teaching certificates for Nathan Powell for a period of 2 years on the condition of full repayment of all fees owed to the court, and that all states and territories be so notified? Do I have such a motion? Burton, do I have a second? Member Hagerman, second. Member Hagerman, thank you. Any conversation or comments or discussion? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, move us on to our final item, summary of current events, future meeting. And Executive Director Williams, you have some information about our meeting for the end of this fiscal year at least, right?
Yes, so President Core, Vice President Burton, members, because of the large number of new members, we have some quorum issues for the board's April, May, and June board meetings. So as I've been able to kind of confirm with, I think all of you, a majority at least, we'll look to move the April board meeting from the Monday that it's currently scheduled to a Friday, which would be April 22nd. Board staff will work to push that communication out to the field so that they know that we've changed our board meeting date for April. Based upon the conversation we had today about the quarterly reports and the ESA handbook, any board members who have additional thoughts or who shared their thoughts at today's meeting but wanted board staff to have like a really good narrative of the questions or comments made, please send that to myself so that I can work with the department ahead of the April board meeting. For May, we will cancel the May board meeting, but we will move up the June board meeting. So we're looking at a June 9th or 10th board meeting that will encompass agenda items that we need to discuss for May, but then also agenda items that we'll discuss for June. Moving the board meeting up from the last week of June into the second week of June is actually quite nice because it will allow for board staff to really prepare ahead of time for the board's retreat and August board meeting. And it will allow for board staff, including myself, to have a little bit more time on preparing for any hiring of new staffers, new board staffers that may come with fiscal year 23's budget. So President Cord, just so you're aware, I and as well as board staff will continue to meet with new board members to get them up to speed on some of the larger policy areas of the State Board of Education. And I do look forward to our August retreat where we'll get to sit down and really strategize on what we want to see in the next couple of years while our new members serve out their terms.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Any comments from the board before I adjourn us? Fantastic. Then with that, I will officially adjourn us at 1:01 p.m.